Today's topic is the Allegory of the Cave, which was written by Plato, and it's part of a larger work called The Republic, which was a Socratic dialogue in which Socrates was the narrator, having a dialogue with a few other people in which they were trying to outline a utopian society, what the best way to govern and to have a society run would be. And the part that I want to really focus on is the allegory of the cave today, because I think it's a pretty interesting topic. Now, it starts off with depicting a cave that's underground, and there's prisoners in this cave, and the prisoners have their necks and their legs bound, so that they can only look in front of them and they can't move around, and they're facing a wall. And behind them, off in the distance and upward, is a fire. And this fire is blazing all the time. In between the fire and the prisoners is a walkway. And the walkway has people walking back and forth, carrying different objects that cast shadows in front of the prisoners. And the objects are, just simple things like shapes of animals, trees, people, whatever. And those objects, the shadows of those objects are being cast on the wall in front of the prisoners. And the prisoners, this is all the prisoners know. They can't even look to see each other and talk to each other. They can talk to each other, but they can't look at each other. They can't look behind them. They can only see what's in front of them. So growing up this way, because these prisoners, it says, have been prisoners since childhood, chained like they are, this is their reality. This is all that they know. They don't know anything other than the shadows cast in front of them. The thing about it is they don't even realize that the shadows cast in front of them are shadows. They think these are real things. So their whole reality is based on these shadows in front of them. And they start naming them, and they start, kind of talking about what they could be or what they are. And they hear people, some people that are holding these objects to be cast, to have their shadows cast. Some of them talk, and they think that the prisoners think that the people talking behind them are the things being, the shadows being cast on the wall. But this is their whole reality. They don't know. They don't even know that there's people there. They only know what's in front of them. Now, Socrates goes on to say, what would happen if one prisoner was to be let free? And he goes through all the things that he would happen. Like, he hasn't ever stood up, so when he gets up, it's going to be painful. He's going to be confused because he's now seeing the things that are behind him. He's seeing the fire, he's seeing the people, he's seeing the objects that they're carrying, he's seeing the whole room. And this room is mind-boggling to him. He doesn't realize that this is a possibility, that these things were possibilities before, but now he's seeing them. So it's painful for him to get up and to start walking around. As he starts walking around, he realizes that there's this upward pathway that leads outside of the cave. Once he gets outside of the cave, the light is just blinding. He has never seen daylight before. The only light he had was the light that was behind him casting the shadows. So imagine, being in a movie theater, watching a movie for a couple hours and then going out into the daylight, and how that feels. Now imagine if you've never felt the daylight. It's disorienting, to say the least. And at first, the only things that the prisoner that was released can recognize are the shadows being cast in the light, because those are what his eyes were accustomed to seeing. So now he's outside of the cave, but he can still only see shadows because his eyes haven't acclimated. Once he sees after a while, he sees the shadows, he can recognize them, and he knows what the shapes are. because he does have some knowledge of what the shapes are from his being in the cave and seeing them on the wall. Then it goes on to say that the next things he's able to see are reflections in water. So the blurred images of himself, of the trees, the birds flying by, other people. He's starting to recognize these as part of reality. And then after a while, he gets to the point where now his eyes are able to see things for what they are, and he doesn't have to look at the shadows or the reflections. He can look at the physical object and understand that this is what it is. And further, he looks up and he sees the sun, and he thinks that he realizes that the sun is what illuminates everything that he's seeing. This freed prisoner now has this new understanding of reality, and he's able to see, and he's able to start grasping things as they are in this new reality. As he's up there, he remembers about all the people down below, the other prisoners, and he's like, oh man, I gotta go free them and bring them over here, and they need to be a part of this world now. This is reality, not the cave. So he goes down and he's telling them all the things that he saw, all the things that he's experienced, and they think he's crazy. He can't identify the shadows on the wall anymore, and because of that, they think he's nuts. They're like, I don't know where you've been or what you think you saw, but you're crazy. You lost your mind, and we don't want to be a part of that. And they're pretty upset about it, and they even say that if anyone else like him were to come and give them the same story, that they'd kill them, because they don't want their reality upset. They can't think of this in the way that he's thinking of it, because they don't know it. They haven't experienced it. So I guess it's not technically their fault, is it? But that's essentially the allegory of the cave. And now I have some parts of it highlighted that I'd like to talk about and go into a little details of my own. We need to see if we can figure out who is who in these stories, right? The prisoners are everyday people, the citizens of everywhere. And the people going back and forth carrying the objects that the shadows are being cast on the wall, can be looked at as government and politicians, religion and religious figures, the media. It can be looked at as marketers, social media influencers, anybody that's trying to deceive you into seeing what they want your reality to be. So that's first and foremost. We'll go ahead and start discussing the parts that I highlighted. This first line is from the very first page, but it was the one that kind of told me, okay, I want to do this video. And it's real simple, which is kind of my bag, right? They only see their own shadows or the shadows of one another. This line is what got me to want to make this video. I normally talk about Eastern philosophy, and this is a Greek philosopher, but that line got me. And the reason it got me is because essentially it's saying the prisoners don't know themselves. They only know their shadows. They only know their shadows. They don't know themselves. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know I'm really big on knowing yourself. I'm really big on being aware and being conscious and just being. So for them to only know their shadows, to me, right away, I went to, they don't know themselves. They don't know themselves because they don't have the tools to know themselves. And why don't they have the tools to know themselves? Because the people that hold them captive took it away. They took away the tool, which is your sight and your movement and your thoughts. By chaining them up since they were children, they take away any avenue in which that these people can know themselves. So that is why I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this video. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? I've already said this. The people that are in control of them took away the tools necessary for them to know themselves, to see anything but the shadows, to not even only know themselves, but just know true reality. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Because they don't have the tools to see reality, the reality that they do see is reality. And this is part of deception. This is part of manipulation that we all go through. It's a very bad thing. To them, I said, the truth would literally be nothing but the shadows of the images. There's no substance to the reality that they have. This is starting to sound like today, isn't it? It goes on to say that the prisoner that would be released would much prefer, upon his release, would much prefer to look at the things that he was accustomed to seeing rather than go and see the other things. So it says, will he not fancy the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are now shown to him? So at first, when the prisoner is released, he's thinking the things that he's now seeing, the new things that he's seeing, aren't reality, because he just doesn't have the mental capacity to understand that, no, these things are even more real than the images on the wall. And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? This part's kind of weird, because in the allegory of the cave, he doesn't really say who the captor is that sets this prisoner free. It doesn't even say if it's a captor. It just says that he was let go. This kind of growth doesn't happen by just pushing yourself. So that's what I like about this line. This is talking about something that made him free himself, whether it was in today's world, like for us, for examples, I'll try to think of some. A teacher that you had in high school or in college or whatever, or even an old-timer that you work with, says something to you that just clicks, and you're like, you know what, I need to know a little more about that. And then you start kind of doing your research. Okay, maybe this guy was crazy, but maybe he's not. What else does he have to say? What else can I find out about what he says? And this kind of, creates the snowball rolling down the mountain. It could be a situation that you found yourself in, right? A lot of times when you lose someone or you have some significant tragedy, it creates this paradigm shift within you where you start seeing things differently than you've never saw before. And once you start seeing these things, you just become more inquisitive and more inquisitive and more inquisitive until you just are trying to see reality for what it truly is and not what your preconceived notions or the notions that you were taught to perceive were. And if they were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who were quickest to observe the passing shadow and to remark which of them went before, which followed after, which were together, and who were therefore best able to draw conclusions as to the future, do you think that he would care for such honors and glories, or envy the possessors of them? Would he not say with Homer, better to be the poor servant of a poor master, and to endure anything rather than think as they do and live after their manner? I think that he would rather suffer anything than entertain these false notions and live in this miserable manner. So he's talking about, like, if the prisoners give each other honors for, like, understanding, okay, this is happening next, and because we've studied this so long, we know that 2 of these is coming next. And, they look at the smartest idiot, essentially, with high honors. And he's basically saying that the guy that went out of the cave wouldn't give a shit about that anymore. He's like, no, that's you guys, I don't need that. I don't need that at all. This is not reality. I'm not a part of it. He will be incapable of going back to just staring at shit on the cave wall and thinking that's reality. If I am right, certain professors of education must be wrong when they say that they can put a knowledge into the soul which was not there before, like sight into blind eyes. Whereas our argument shows that the power and capacity of learning exists in the soul already, and that just as the eye was unable to turn from darkness to light without the whole body, so too the instrument of knowledge can only by the movement of the soul be turned from the world of becoming into that of being, and learn by degrees to endure the sight of being and of the brightest and best of being, or in other words, of the good. This was another part of this story that really got me going as far as like an Eastern philosophy kind of aspect. The first part, he's talking about how teachers can give you the information. They can show you where you need to go, but you have to walk through. You have to do the learning. You have to take the information and turn it into knowledge and turn it into wisdom. Kind of like that one story about, I don't know if it was Buddha or I don't know who said it, but the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. This is kind of the same thing. The teacher's that's showing you the information is not all there is to this. He's not any better than you. He's just giving you the knowledge, and it's your turn to put in the work and to learn the thing. But then he also talks about going from the world of becoming into that of being, and that you need to move the whole soul in order to go from becoming to being. You can't be unless you have your whole soul into it. And just as anything, you learn by degrees to endure the sight of being. So at first, you don't know how to be. You're becoming. You're giving yourself the correct pieces, but you got to put in the work, and you got to put it all together at some point. And this is what it's talking about: is just kind of putting those small pieces together until you're the whole. So yeah, I really, really like this one too. This story is a great story because it's as old as dirt. I think it was like 375 BC when it was written or whatever. But since then, every point in history, you can use this allegory of the cave and kind of plug whatever you want to plug in. Right now, specifically for me, the images that are being shown to us are not being questioned, and the people in the cave, a lot of them are just kind of going with the flow, like, okay, well, this guy said so, and I saw it on TV 8 million times, so it's got to be true, and that's good enough for them. But it shouldn't be. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but I would advise you to do your own research with a lot of things. Don't just take someone's word for it. We need to understand that the reason that people deceive and the reason that people manipulate is to get what they want. And when you manipulate, what you do is you make people think that it's your idea, that it's their idea rather. So just like the prisoners in the cave, they're seeing the reality flash before them, thinking that it's reality, not knowing that it's not. That's where we're at today, especially. You cannot have a differing opinion than someone without being demonized. This is what happens when societies start to crumble. You don't have this open marketplace of ideas. You have one person or one group of people telling you what they want you to think and how they want you to act, and they don't even want to give you any kind of credibility as to why you think that's not a good idea. You can't even honestly have a discussion, and that's really, really bad. So we need to stop being the people in the cave. We need to be the people that come up out of the cave and start struggling with the light and see things for what they are. We're not enemies. The average person that you see walking down the street is not your enemy. There are enemies, but if you're listening to what you're being spoon-fed, you're never going to know who those enemies are. So my advice is to do your research. Don't just take people's word for it. If something doesn't feel right to you, you need to figure out why. I don't care if it's meditation, how you want to do it, and you want to sit and think about something and just, spin it around in your head every which way you can. That is part of meditation too, is these thoughts, these contemplations. But don't just believe people. That's the bottom line. And don't demonize people that you don't understand. That's the other thing. You're being told to hate people, and you're being shown this caricature of people that disagree with you, but you're not understanding where they're coming from. Because I guarantee you, if you actually sit down and talk to someone and treat them like a human being, you'll find that you want the same thing that they want. And the core of what you want. And I'm talking about true things. Anytime you think something, you need to think, is this my thought, or did someone give me this thought and now I'm thinking it's my own? So I think I'm going to leave it at that. But I really, really, really can't stress enough, we need to come together. We need to see things for what they are. We don't always have to agree. And in fact, that's what makes the world a good place, is that we don't always agree. But we need to treat people like people, and we need to look at and really start looking at different opinions. I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, I understand, he's evil and that's why he wants it. No, look at why people have the thought processes that they have. Try to understand someone as best as you can. If you disagree with someone and you think that you're so right, the best way to take that down is to look at their argument, to understand their argument, and try to put why that argument is wrong in words that they'll understand. Nobody does this anymore. We can't have any kind of arguments, differences in opinions. I don't even want to say arguments, differences in opinions. There's a reason why we're all being pitted against each other right now, and we need to figure out what that is. I'm not saying I know, because I don't, but I'm saying I see it, and we all need to think about why that is. So don't hate your neighbor, think for yourself, move your ass out of the cave, and become the person that you want everyone else to be. First and foremost, become the person you want everyone else to be. Take care of your own shit before you tell someone to take care of theirs. All right. If you like this video, if you watched it all the way to the end, like, share, subscribe, do whatever you're supposed to do on these videos. Please give me some comments. I need them. I want to see what you think. And I think this one's going to rile up some feathers possibly. So let's do it.